Listen, if one more person tells me guppies are the perfect beginner fish, I'm going to lose it. Yeah, sure, some guppies are bulletproof little survivors that'll thrive in a puddle. But walk into any pet store, pick up one of those fancy guppies with the flowing fins and flashy colours, and you might be setting yourself up for heartbreak. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Not all guppies are created equal. Some strains are hardy, beautiful, and actually beginner-friendly. Others? They're genetic disasters waiting to happen, bred purely for Instagram photos and impulse buys. So today, we're doing something that needs to be done. I'm ranking the most popular fancy guppy strains from S tier, the absolute best, down to D tier, the ones you should probably avoid unless you know exactly what you're getting into. We're talking genetics, health risks, actual care requirements, and the stuff the pet industry doesn't want you asking about. This isn't going to be some fluffy, all fish are beautiful content. This is the real deal. No sugarcoating, no corporate-friendly nonsense. All right, let's get into it. Tuxedo Guppy, starting strong with the Tuxedo Guppy. And honestly, this is one of the few fancy strains I'd confidently recommend to almost anyone. The tuxedo pattern, that sharp contrast between the front half and the dark rear body, is clean, recognizable, and most importantly, genetically stable. You're not dealing with some fragile designer mutation here. These fish have been around forever, and breeders have had time to establish strong, healthy lines. What I love about tuxedos is that they're visually interesting without being structurally compromised. The fins aren't absurdly oversized, the body proportions are normal. They swim like actual fish, not like they're dragging a wedding dress behind them. And because the genetics are stable, you're way less likely to end up with weak immune systems, spontaneous deaths, or that heartbreaking scenario where half your new fish don't make it past quarantine. Pet store quality can be hit or miss, obviously, but even mediocre tuxedo guppies tend to be survivable. Get them from a decent breeder, though, and you're looking at fish that'll live 2 to 3 years, breed reliably, and actually look like the pictures. Solid S tier. No notes. Delta tail guppy next up delta tails, and these are sitting comfortably in S tier as well. The delta tail refers to the shape, that big triangular tail fin that spreads out like, well, a delta. It's dramatic without being ridiculous. You get that wow factor when people look at your tank, but you're not sacrificing the fish's ability to actually function. Here's why delta tails rank so high. The fin structure, while larger than a standard guppy, isn't so exaggerated that it causes constant stress or health problems. Compare that to some of the insane ribbon tail or veil tail strains we'll get to later, and you'll see the difference. Delta tails can still swim efficiently. They're not struggling against their own fins every time they move. Genetics-wise, delta tails are pretty reliable. You'll find them in tons of color variations. Reds, blues, yellows, multicolored, and most of those lines have been bred long enough that you're not dealing with mystery mutations or hidden defects. Again, breeder quality matters, but this is a strain where even pet store specimens have a decent chance of thriving if you do your part with water quality and feeding. One thing to watch, fin rot. Any guppy with larger fins is more susceptible, just because there's more surface area for bacteria to latch onto. But if you're maintaining clean water and not overstocking, delta tails handle it fine. S tier, easy. Moscow Blue Guppy now, we're moving into A tier, and leading this category is the Moscow Blue Guppy. If you've ever seen a high-quality Moscow Blue in person, you know why people obsess over these fish. That deep, solid, metallic blue coloring is absolutely stunning. It doesn't look painted on. It looks like the fish is made of polished sapphire. It's one of those strains that makes people stop and stare at your tank. So why isn't it S tier? Because quality control is all over the place. A true Moscow Blue from a reputable breeder is incredible. You'll get that intense color, good fin structure, decent hardiness. But here's the problem. The market is flooded with mislabeled fish. Pet stores slap Moscow blue on anything vaguely blue, and half the time what you're actually getting is a poorly bred mutt with inconsistent genetics. Real Moscow blues are also a bit more delicate than tuxedos or delta tails. They can be sensitive to water parameter swings, especially pH and temperature fluctuations. They're not fragile exactly, but they're less forgiving. You need to be on top of your tank maintenance. Beginners can absolutely keep them, but I wouldn't recommend them as a first fish ever. Get some experience with hardier strains first, then level up to Moscows. Color-wise, be prepared for variation. Even from good breeders, you might get some individuals with lighter or slightly off-tone coloring. It's part of working with color genetics. But when you get a good one, it's worth it. Solid A tier. Half Moon Guppies are another A tier pick, and they sit right on the edge of S tier for me. The Half Moon tail is basically a more extreme version of the Delta, a full 180-degree spread that looks like a perfect half circle. It's gorgeous, it's dramatic, and surprisingly, most Half Moon lines are still pretty functional. The reason I'm keeping them in A tier instead of S is purely because of the increased fin size. Yes, they're bred to maintain decent body strength and swimming ability, but you are starting to approach the limits of what's practical. Larger fins mean more drag, more energy expenditure, and more vulnerability to damage and disease. In a well-maintained tank, Half Moons do great, but if your water quality slips, if you've got aggressive tank mates, or if you're dealing with any kind of stress factor, those big fins are going to be the first thing to show problems. You'll see fraying, tearing, or the start of fin rot before you'd notice it on a smaller fin strain. That said, Half Moon genetics are generally solid. This is a well-established strain, not some brand-new designer experiment. Breeders know what they're doing. You're getting consistent results, especially if you source from someone reputable. Just be aware that you're committing to a slightly higher level of care, a tier deserved. Mosaic Guppy. All right, moving down to B tier and starting here with Mosaic Guppies. These are the ones with that wild, irregular color patterning. Lots of spots and splotches, almost like someone flicked paint across the fish. They're visually interesting, definitely eye-catching, and they've got a sort of chaotic beauty that appeals to people who want something less uniform. Here's the thing about mosaics. The genetics are complicated. You're dealing with multiple color genes interacting in unpredictable ways, and that means you get a lot of variation, even within the same batch. Some mosaic guppies look incredible. Others look like they couldn't decide what color to be and just gave up halfway. From a health standpoint, mosaics are generally okay. They're not structurally compromised, like some of the strains we'll talk about later. The fins are usually normal-sized, the body proportions are fine, and they swim like regular guppies. The issue is purely genetic consistency and sourcing quality. If you're buying mosaics from a pet store, it's a total lottery. You might get gorgeous fish. You might get washed out, sickly-looking things that barely resemble the pictures. Even from breeders, unless they're specifically focusing on mosaic lines and selecting heavily for quality, you're going to see a lot of variance. So why B tier and not lower? Because when you get a good mosaic, it's really good, and because the health risks are minimal compared to the more extreme strains. If you're okay with some unpredictability and you're buying from a trusted source, mosaics are a solid choice. Just don't expect every fish to be a showstopper. Cobra Guppies are next, and they're sitting firmly in B tier. The cobra pattern, those vertical rosette markings on the body, is distinctive and honestly pretty cool. It's one of the few patterns that's recognizable even from a distance, and it adds texture to the fish in a way that solid colors just don't. Health-wise, cobras are generally fine. The pattern is a color trait, not a structural one, so you're not dealing with deformities or compromised swimming ability. The fins are typically normal-sized and the body proportions are standard guppy. These fish can live full, healthy lives if you take care of them properly. The reason they're in B tier and not higher is twofold. First, the pattern can be inconsistent. Some cobras have bold, clear rosettes. Others have faded, barely visible markings that make you wonder if they're even cobras at all. It's a genetic thing, and it's hard to guarantee quality unless you're buying from a breeder who's really focused on the strain. Second, cobras are often mixed with other patterns, mosaic, tuxedo, whatever, and those mixed genetics can introduce unpredictability. You might get stunning F1 fish, but if you try to breed them yourself, the offspring can be all over the place. For display purposes, cobras are great. For breeding projects, they can be frustrating. Still, they're attractive, relatively hardy, and widely available. If you see a nice-looking cobra guppy and the price is reasonable, go for it. B tier is a respectable spot. Dumbo ear guppy. Now we're entering C tier, and things are starting to get questionable. Let's talk about Dumbo ear guppies, also called elephant ear guppies. These are the ones with massively oversized pectoral fins that flare out from the sides of the body like, well, elephant ears. Look, I'll admit it, they're cute. There's a novelty factor. They're visually distinct in a way that most guppy strains aren't. But here's the problem, though oversized pectoral fins are a structural modification, and they come with real functional downsides. First, swimming efficiency is compromised. Those big floppy fins create drag and make it harder for the fish to maneuver. In a calm, well-maintained tank with no strong flow and no aggressive tank mates, Dumbo ears can manage. But put them in a community tank with any kind of current or competition for food, and they're going to struggle. Second, those fins are fragile. They're prone to damage, tearing, and infection. If anything nips at them, if they get caught on decor, if the water quality dips even a little, you're looking at problems. Fin rot loves Dumbo ears. Third, and this is the big one, breeding for extreme pectoral fins has introduced other genetic weaknesses into many Dumbo lines. You'll often see shorter lifespans, lower fertility, and higher rates of spontaneous death. Not every Dumbo ear guppy is doomed, but the odds are worse than with more natural strains. If you really love the look and you're willing to provide pristine conditions and accept the risks, fine. But for most people, especially beginners, Dumbo ears are more trouble than they're worth. C tier, and honestly, they're on the edge of decoy guppy. Koi guppies are another C tier placement. And this one might be controversial because koi guppies are hugely popular right now. The coloring, that red, white and black pattern that mimics koi carp, is undeniably beautiful. When you see a high-quality koi guppy, it's stunning. The problem is that high-quality koi guppies are rare. Here's what most people don't realize. The koi color pattern is genetically complex and extremely inconsistent. You're trying to get 3 distinct colors to appear in the right places on a fish that's, what, 1.5 inches long? It's hard. Most koi guppies you'll find in stores are poorly expressed. The colors are muddy, the pattern is vague. They look more like confused calicos than actual koi. Even from breeders, getting true koi quality requires serious selection and culling. And because the demand is so high, a lot of breeders are cutting corners, selling subpar fish as koi just to cash in on the trend. Health-wise, koi guppies are a mixed bag. The color genetics themselves don't cause structural problems. But because the breeding is so intensive and often poorly managed, you'll see a lot of weak immune systems, low fertility, and short lifespans. It's not universal, but it's common enough to be a real concern. If you can find a reputable breeder who's actually producing quality koi guppies, and you're willing to pay a premium, they can be worth it. But buying random koi guppies from a pet store is a gamble, and more often than not, you're going to be disappointed. C tier, and I'm being generous. Balloon body guppy. Alright, we've arrived at D tier, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Balloon body guppies are, in my opinion, a mistake. These are guppies that have been selectively bred for a shortened, rounded spine, giving them a cute balloon-like body shape. And yes, some people think they're adorable. But here's the reality. Breeding fish for spinal deformities is ethically questionable and results in animals that suffer. Balloon body guppies have compressed internal organs. Their swim bladder doesn't function properly. Their digestive system is cramped. They struggle to swim efficiently. They're more prone to bloating, constipation, and swim bladder disease. Their lifespan is significantly shorter than normal guppies, often living only a year or less. And for what? So they look chunky and cute for a few months before they die prematurely? It's the same logic as breeding dogs with faces so flat they can't breathe. It's prioritizing human aesthetic preferences over animal welfare, and I can't support it. If you already own balloon body guppies, take care of them as best you can. They didn't choose to be bred this way. But please, don't buy more. Don't support the market for these fish. There are so many beautiful, healthy guppy strains out there. Choose one of those instead. D tier, and honestly, I'd go lower if I could. Ribbon-tail guppy ribbon-tails are another D-tier disaster. And again, this is about extreme breeding for appearance at the expense of function. Ribbon-tail guppies have been bred for absurdly long, narrow tail fins that trail behind them like ribbons. And sure, in a perfectly still tank with no flow, no tank mates, and obsessive maintenance, they might survive. But in any kind of real-world scenario, ribbon tails are a nightmare. Those long, delicate fins are constantly getting damaged. They're impossible to keep clean. They're breeding grounds for bacteria and fungus. Fin rot is basically guaranteed. And even if you somehow manage to prevent infections, the fins are so long and fragile that they tear on their own from the sheer mechanical stress of swimming. The fish themselves are exhausted. They're spending so much energy just dragging around these ridiculous fins that they can't eat properly, can't establish territory, can't behave like normal guppies. It's like forcing someone to run a marathon while wearing a ball gown made of tissue paper. And the worst part? These fish are marketed to beginners. They're sold as fancy and exotic, without any mention of the care requirements or the inevitable health problems. People buy them thinking they're getting something special, and then they watch them deteriorate over weeks or months, often, blaming themselves for poor care, when the reality is the fish were doomed from the start. Ribbon-tails are a prime example of the industry prioritizing profit over ethics. They breed fish that look impressive in photos, sell them to unsuspecting customers, and then move on to the next trend while those customers deal with the heartbreak. D tier, absolutely, and I'd encourage everyone to skip them entirely. Platinum Guppy last up in D tier, and this one's a bit different because it's not about structure, it's about genetics. Platinum Guppies are bred for an all-white or extremely pale colouring, and achieving that look requires some seriously intensive selective breeding. The problem is that in pushing for that extreme colour, breeders often end up with fish that are genetically weak across the board. Platinum Guppies are notorious for being fragile. They have weak immune systems, they're highly susceptible to disease, they're sensitive to water parameters in ways that normal guppies just aren't, and their lifespan is often shockingly short. I've seen platinum guppies die within days of purchase, even in well-maintained tanks with experienced keepers. Part of the problem is inbreeding. To get that pure platinum colour, breeders often have to breed very closely related fish over multiple generations, and that concentrates not just the colour genes, but also any harmful recessive traits. You end up with fish that are beautiful but biologically compromised. There's also a transparency issue. Because platinum guppies lack pigment, you can sometimes see their internal organs through their skin, which some people find interesting, but which is also a sign of how extreme the breeding has become. These aren't normal, healthy fish. They're the result of pushing genetics to an unnatural extreme. Are there breeders out there producing healthier platinum lines? Maybe, but finding them is difficult, and even the best platinum guppies are going to be more delicate than almost any other strain. Unless you're an experienced keeper looking for a specific project, I'd recommend avoiding them. D tier, final answer. Alright, so that's the tier list. Let's recap quickly. S tier, your best bets. Tuxedo Guppies and Delta Tails. These are the strains that combine beauty, hardiness, and genetic stability. You really can't go wrong here, especially for beginners. A tier excellent with some caveats. Moscow Blues and Half Moons. These are gorgeous fish that require a bit more attention to water quality and sourcing, but they're absolutely worth it if you're willing to put in the effort. B tier, good but inconsistent. Mosaics and Cobras. These strains are visually interesting and generally healthy, but genetic variation and quality control can be issues. Buy from reputable sources and manage your expectations. C tier, proceed with caution. Dumbo ears and koi guppies. These are popular and they can be beautiful, but they come with real risks. Dumbo ears have structural problems and koi genetics are a mess. Only go for these if you know what you're getting into. D tier. Avoid unless you're very experienced and very committed. Balloon bodies, ribbon tails, and platinums. These strains are bred for extreme appearance at the cost of health and welfare. They're fragile, short-lived, and in some cases ethically questionable. There are so many better options out there. Here's the thing I want you to take away from this. Guppies are not all the same. The idea that you can just walk into a pet store, grab any guppy, and have the same easy, beginner-friendly experience is a myth. Some guppies are fantastic. Others are genetic disasters wrapped in pretty colors. Do your research. Ask questions. Find out where your fish are coming from. Look for breeders who prioritize health over appearance. And most importantly, don't feel like you have to buy the flashiest, most extreme fish in the tank. Sometimes the simple, classic strains are the best choice, and there's no shame in that. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Or reading, I guess, depending on how you're consuming this. Let me know in the comments which guppy strain surprised you the most. Did I rank your favorite too low? Do you have horror stories about balloon bodies or ribbon tails? I want to hear them. And if you found this helpful, consider subscribing. I've got more tier lists, breeding guides, and industry deep dives coming, and I promise I'll keep it real. No corporate-friendly fluff. Just honest, experience-based information to help you make better choices in this hobby. Alright, that's it. Go forth and choose your guppies wisely. See you in the next one.